Alright, so in this video I'm going to be showing you some Revenant Stasis Hunter gameplay. I'll briefly cover the build here as fast as I can because the main focus of this video is going to be discussing the Dev Insights article and the exotic armor rework for Stasis specifically. So I'm going to talk about that in length, but quickly here I'll just go over the loadouts that I'm using, and I'm making it quick because we're essentially getting an entire rework to Stasis. So the build that you see here right now might not exist in the same way when the final shape comes out, but if you're still playing Onslaught and you want to farm your shinies for the last 9 days or so of the season, well, then you can take note of this build right here. I'll put dim links in the description, and the rest of the gameplay is going to be discussing the Stasis, essentially Stasis 4.0, right? And it's going to have Legend Onslaught gameplay in the background from waves, well, basically from start to end. I got a couple of 50 wave completions on Legend Midtown, some against Fallen, some against Hive, so there's a little bit of a mix of gameplay in there, but it's I put the gameplay clips in order of waves, so each wave is unedited, and they go in order from lowest to highest. So real quick, I'm using Renewal Grasps simply because it's basically the best exotic to use for Onslaught on Revenant. Somebody has actually, I think it's Coca-Cola, you can check out their YouTube channel. They actually did solo Flawless Legend Midtown using Revenant. And I think they're using Renewal Grasps with a swap to Lucky Pants and of course Indebted Kindness. So that should tell you something about the effectiveness of this build. Of course, this is my own variation, and this is what worked for me, so you can take note. So this is my waves build right here, and I make a swap over to Lucky Pants for damage, and if I need it for augments like Tormentors, Demolitionists, any threatening targets like that during the waves, I can do that. But for this build here, I'm focused on using Verglaw Curve simply because it's just Stasis crystal producing machine, which means that I can constantly feed Whisper of Shards right here. None of these fragments that I'm using, ironically, are being touched by the Stasis rework come the final shape. So, the build technically could exist in the same way, but it all depends on how we're going to play with Frost Armor, right? So Whisper of Shards obviously gives you like a 500% grenade ability regen rate. You obviously need Touch of Winter with those Duskfield grenades to make the slowing field size bigger. Whisper of Durance to make it last longer, to make slow last longer. Whisper of Chains for, I believe it's 40% damage DR, right? So this fragment is getting changed completely. Sorry, I was wrong. This is getting totally reworked, but for right now, it's just you get a static 40% damage resistance as long as you're near frozen targets or stasis crystals. So it's pretty easy to acquire that just by instantly throwing down a Duskfield grenade and being within that slow field close to the crystal or any frozen targets. Right? So yeah, Verglaw Curve, very good. Indebted Kindness for barriers, right? Also for just ad clearing in general. Just a very good weapon to use. We all know that. Dimensional Hypotrochoid. Now, this has definitely become my favorite heavy weapon for Onslaught. At least as far as ad clear, like I prefer this over a machine gun, even over rocket launchers. This thing is just gonna rack up your kills like insane. Unrelenting and Chain Reaction is the exact same combo that I have on my Vow the Disciple Forbearance with Soul Drinker, and the survivability of that Forbearance has always been amazing. Well, now put that on a heavy wave frame, and this is getting buffed in the final shape while Forbearance is getting nerfed. So yeah, and so with this being a heavy grenade launcher, you have 5 in the mag at base without backup mag, right? Come the final shape, since boss spec is going away, you could have 7 in the mag. Every shot is going to do a ton of damage, way more than Forbearance. It's going to kill a lot of enemies because of Chain Reaction, and it's instant healing, right? So anything that can give you healing on a Stasis subclass is just very good, and this is just amazing for ad clear. You'll also see some gameplay in here where I was using Bump in the Night, and this thing's pretty good as well, having Demolitionist. So if I combine Demolitionist with Marksman's Dodge, that's basically 2 ways to reload the rocket launcher, which makes it very good for the waves inside of Onslaught, because if you have to take the time to do a long reload on a rocket launcher or a machine gun, you know, that could just be an instant death for you. So anything that can automate your reloads, I highly recommend it. Also, occasionally use Palmyra B. This is especially useful versus like the Briggs because it has Hack Breach armaments, but also for Stasis in general, for destroying Stasis crystals. So it's very good for that. Auto-loading and lasting impression, I mean, that's just, you know, it's an automatic guaranteed 20% damage buff. From lasting impression, you don't have to build up explosive light, you don't have to do anything to get it. It's just, you know, and being a precision frame rocket launcher, it has tracking. So I think I just switched to this for the final boss against the Tormentor, so I wouldn't lose ammo. Just worked out better there. They got a reserve bump, so I think you have 9 rockets at base. They only do 5% less damage than adaptives and aggressives, so I mean, this is very good. And like I said, if you're up against Fallen and you got to take out like a shielded sky bomber or something, this is a very good weapon to swap to. Also, I was using Salvation's Grip on my Lucky Pants build. Right, so when I switch over to Lucky Pants, I've got Warden's Law. Occasionally I was using Malfeasance as well, but it wasn't until I did like, you know, a good 150 to 200 waves or so of Onslaught before I kind of finalized what my preference was for this Revenant loadout. And so because on my waves loadout I'm using a grenade launcher, when I switch to Lucky Pants, I don't really lose a whole bunch of ammo because I'm still on a grenade launcher, right? And obviously I'm switching from primary to primary, so I don't lose anything there by going from Verglaw to Warden's Law. Indebted Kindness stays the same, and then the only thing that changes is the heavy. And this thing is just crazy for boss damage. Like it actually, you get so much ammo, and it's just a ton of shatter damage. And when you synergize like Whisper of, actually I'm not using Whisper of Fissures, but you could use Whisper of Fissures to increase shatter damage, right? But obviously I'm using Whisper of Rending because as targets flash in and out of being frozen, I get a 40% damage buff to Warden's Law, right? Primary weapons do 40% more damage to frozen targets, so Whisper of Rending is a must on Stasis Lucky Pants. And if you're gonna do like Verglaw curve gameplay, well, you're using a primary weapon, and it's kind of like a lightweight frame bow, so it doesn't do a ton of damage, and especially in those later waves, Whisper of Rending is really going to help you out. But yeah, this has ended up being my preferred loadout for boss phases. Warden's Law also does do more damage technically than Malfeasance if you're just using it versus bosses and you've got your illegally modded holster procced, so yeah, very good there. So I'll quickly show you the combat mods that I'm using here. You can take a screenshot. This is just a 4 armor charge stack setup for throwing grenades, right? You get like 37% of your grenade back if you got 4 stacks of armor charge. Charged up, stacks on stacks, so that way I can hold 4 stacks and every orb that I pick up gives me 2 stacks. So that's pretty simple there. Fastball is just really nice for long range precision targeting for your grenades. I don't always use it, but when I do use it, I find that I just generally have better grenade throws, better aim. So yeah, that's up to you. For the Lucky Pants here, well, I'm just switching to surges, and I keep on recuperation because oftentimes my teammates are producing orbs, and it's kind of nice to do a dodge near some orbs or just go scoop them up and have some instant healing. But double kinetic weapon surge for Warden's Law, that's 20% more damage. And Salvation's Grip doesn't really need a boost because you're producing stasis crystals, so a lot of it is just shatter damage anyways. It's not like stasis weapon surge is really going to help you out a whole lot. Plus you're especially focused on Warden's Law, and you don't want to spend all your Salvation's Grip ammo because when you swap back to your Renewal Grasps, you want to have some ammo for your Dimensional Hypotrochoid. right? So that's pretty much it there. Targeting as well, which is just kind of nice for me, being an older gamer with, you know, not necessarily the best aim, and on console. So the visual effects can sometimes be a little bit hard to stay on target, so I like targeting, and sometimes I like to run kinetic unflinching as well, so that's up to you. Yep, so that's basically it. Also, if you saw one of my last, second to last video, I was covering the Brave Arsenal weapons. While I was testing out this Revenant Hunter here, I ended up getting 3 more shinies, or 2 more shinies, and a god roll that I was looking for. So I got another blast furnace with the exact same rolls as my other shiny blast furnace, except for rapid hit. This is the only difference, so that's kind of cool. I got it an edge transit here, a shiny one with cascade point and bait and switch and deconstruct. So this is like 3 out of 4 on the perks that I want. And if only this was Envious Assassin here, this would be an absolute god roll as far as 3rd and 4th column perks. But unfortunately, I got all crap here. Literally nothing that I want. So unfortunately, I'm probably just going to end up using the non-shiny variant that I have of Cascade and Bait and Switch. And I've also got like an Envious Bait and Switch. I've got an Envious Deconstruct. So yeah, a bit of a shame here, but you know, that's just the way it is. And then I got the Luna's Howl that I was looking for with Enlightened Action and Precision Instrument. This is to supplement, like I already have the Heal Clip Incandescent, I've got a Subsistence Incandescent, I've got a Magnificent Howl. But this one I want to use with Gunslinger for Lucky Pants, like if I ever need to use a special here in my kinetic slot, like Wither Horde or whatever, then, and if I'm on Gunslinger, I can switch over to a Solar Hand Cannon just for some really good Lucky Pants damage, because Precision Instrument gives you a 30% damage buff, and Enlightened Action for that reload speed. It's really the only viable 3rd column perk to pair with this style of weapon for the purpose that I intend on using it. Plus it's got extended mag, so that's pretty good there. Yeah, so I'm looking forward to using that. Plus, even though it's a 140 hand cannon and you can't really build up your Lucky Pants stacks as well with Luna's Howl compared to like a 180 or a burst damage like Warden's Law, right? It basically has the recoil of a 180, so it's very easy to stay on target, which means that, you know, this could be pretty good. It's obviously better than nothing. There's really no other solar hand cannon that, I don't think there's any other solar hand cannon that can compete with Luna's Howl for Lucky Pants damage, but I wouldn't know specifically, so somebody can correct me if I'm wrong there. But yeah, that's it. I'll go into the gameplay next and talk about Stasis 4.0 essentially. Okay, so yeah, May 22nd, Bungie put out a Dev Insights article for the Final Shape Abilities tuning. This is just a preview on the changes to all 5 subclasses, and there are an absolute ton of changes, actually almost overwhelming. But namely, the biggest change is going to be to Stasis, and this is amazing news because Stasis has been far behind as a viable subclass compared to all of the other subclasses in PvE for quite a while. So I mean, this is great. Obviously this season we've got like Howl of the Storm and whatever that other aspect is from the seasonal artifact. So I mean, Stasis this season is better than it has been in the last couple years, but it's about to get way more dynamic, which I'm pretty excited for. So it's hard to say if this is going to be absolutely better or worse or anything like that, but I think to me it's going to be better because it's giving you, like I said, more dynamic ways to build craft with Stasis, and just overall some quality of life changes and some more intuitive type of changes, right? So that's pretty good. So what's the main feature here? We've got Frost Armor, and we've got some changes to Stasis Shards, basically. So Frost Armor is the biggest change. This is essentially going to be like Woven Mail, and occasionally you can get some healing as well with Frost Armor. It's not going to give you the same amount of damage resistance as Woven Mail. You're not going to get it instantly. You're going to have to slowly build up your stacks of Frost Armor to get up to a maximum of 22.5% damage resistance, and 36% depending on what fragments you're using, right? So there's some different ways to play into Frost Armor to get different levels of it. So that's kind of unique, and this also means we're seeing other fragments change, like Whisper of Chains is basically going away as we know it. Whisper of Chains, like what I'm using in this build here, gives you up to, I think, 40% damage resist when you're near frozen targets or stasis crystals. So that's always just like an instant way to get, you know, really good damage resistance. I mean, that's almost on par with Woven Mail. But now we're going to have Frost Armor coming up shortly here. So Frost Armor at base, it gives you 4.5% damage resistance per stack, right? So you pick up a stasis shard depending on what your aspects and fragment setup is. Like, you have to set up to actually use Frost Armor, just like in the same way, at least as far as I understand it, like when you use Strand, like you don't automatically get Woven Mail just because you're playing the Strand subclass, or just because you pick up an Orb of Power, or just because you throw a Tangle. Like, no, you have to build into it, right? So like Titans can get Woven Mail from their Tangles with Into the Fray. Any subclass can get Woven Mail from picking up Orbs of Power while having Thread of Warding equipped, which is a fragment. And Hunters can get Woven Mail from grappling onto Tangle points, or just using their grapple if they're using Cyroteracthan's Facade, right? So it's not like everybody's just gonna have access to Frost Armor. You're gonna have to build into it. But yeah, at base you get 4.5% per stack, and you can get up to 5 stacks of Frost Armor. So it means when you're at ×5, you will have 22.5% damage resistance, and it's on a timer for 9 seconds, right? So obviously you have 9 seconds to build up your max stacks of Frost Armor, and I guess you can potentially do that if you have 5 stasis shards laying around on the ground. Then you can instantly pick up all 5 and have the maximum amount of Frost Armor. Right, but I think one of the things that you're going to have to pay attention to is the timer, right? So actually acquiring max stacks of Frost Armor is going to be, you know, it's going to be time dependent. Like, are you going to be able to squeeze in that many stacks while the timer is up, right? Now, if you have Whisper of Rhyme, right? So Whisper of Rhyme is getting a major rework. You no longer get the Stasis Overshield, right? The Stasis Overshield, as we know it, is getting removed from the game completely, right? So Whisper of Rhyme is not going to give you Overshields when you pick up Stasis Shards anymore. Instead, it's going to increase the number of stacks of Frost Armor that you can get. So instead of getting 5, you can get 8, which means that at 4.5% per stack, you can get up to 36% damage resistance, right? And it increases the timer from 9 seconds to 13 seconds, right? So this is kind of like an Ember of Solace for Solar. You know how it increases your Restoration and Radiant timers? Well, Whisper of Rhyme is basically going to work in the same way as Ember of Solace, right? Then we've got our Harvest aspect. So every class, Warlock, Titan, and Hunter, they all have aspects that revolve around producing stasis shards, right? So on Hunter here we've got Grim Harvest, and notably Grim Harvest is going to be the best aspect out of all 3. It gets some special features compared to like Tectonic Harvest, and the Warlock one is I'm blanking on its name right now. But yeah, you're going to be able to, when you use a Harvest aspect, not only are you going to be able to create stasis shards like you were before, but you're also going to get healing from those stasis shards on top of the Frost Armor stacks, right? So even though you don't get the Stasis Overshield with Whisper of Rhyme, like as long as you're using a Harvest aspect, you can still get healing. So that's kind of nice, right? And obviously you can still produce your stasis shards and get your Frost Armor now like that, right? But Grim Harvest, there's some language in the article that says, actually here, I'll see if I can read it to you verbatim. Glacial Harvest is the Warlock Harvest aspect, by the way. So there's a quote in here by Bungie. It says, large stasis shards, right? That's the key word there, is large. From Grim Harvest, grant more health and Frost Armor stacks. Now this sentence is the only reference I've seen to a large stasis shard. So that's interesting. So I guess we'll see when the final shape comes out, but I guess Grim Harvest is going to have some additional language in there that not only can you produce your stasis shards and get your healing and your frost armor, but you're going to produce bigger stasis shards, and they're going to give you larger amounts of health and larger amounts of frost armor stacks. So you get more frost armor, you get more health, basically, if you're using Grim Harvest. So I guess they're kind of trying to really make Revenant be the main beneficiary of a lot of these changes, especially with regards to frost armor. And I would argue for stasis in general, like if you look at all of the changes to stasis, the clear beneficiary here is going to be Revenant, which to me is awesome, because if I had to choose a favorite stasis subclass, it would probably be Revenant. I love Shadebinder for the Bleak Watcher turrets, but I mean they're just kind of like a one-trick pony in that fashion, right? It's just throw down turrets and that's all you got to do, and it's an amazing build just like that. And then Titan is just a little bit, you know, the gameplay loop of throwing crystals and shattering crystals is just not really intuitive to me in the same way that other builds are. But on Revenant, for whatever reason, I just really like the gameplay flow and the loop with Revenant. You know, everything about it, for using Lucky Pants, for Renewal Grasps, for just generic builds. I just like the whole, I like the whole kit that that Hunter has. So, I mean, Revenant could be absolutely amazing in the final shape with a lot of these changes, because they're getting the most amount of changes, and apparently it seems like the most amount of buffs, so that's pretty cool. Right, okay, so the next thing here that I can talk about is Whisper of Fractures. So I've covered the 3 harvest aspects, right? There are some additional changes to other aspects, but I'm just kind of going over basically all of the changes that involve, namely frost armor, things that synergize with frost armor, things that give you access to frost armor, and some things about stasis shards. So Whisper of Fractures is next, and now Whisper of Fractures, instead of giving you melee energy when you're surrounded, this is a fragment that I never used anyway, just because I'm not really keen on stasis melee builds. But yeah, so now Whisper of Fractures is, instead of giving you the melee energy, it's going to give you frost armor from shattering frozen targets with melee damage. And it doesn't say powered melee, it just says any melee damage. So if you're on like a glaive build, or a Synthocept build, or something that involves just any type of melee, then this could potentially be free, easy access to frost armor without having to use a harvest aspect. Or you could stack it with a harvest aspect just to have more uptime on your frost armor. So that's kind of interesting. So yeah, total rework to Whisper of Fractures. Then we've got Renewal Grasps, which is what I'm using here, unironically, and now Renewal Grasps are going to, instead of giving you the resist ×2 or whatever it is, I think it's resist ×1 actually. If you're inside of your Duskfield slowing grenade, like the slowing field, you get damage resistance from Renewal Grasps, right? Like outside of Whisper of Chains. And of course you can stack it with Whisper of Chains, which is what I'm doing in this gameplay, right? So whenever I'm in my Duskfield, you'll see I have like resist ×3, which should be like around 45 to 50% DR, I can't remember, but I'm basically doubling up on my damage resistance from A, Renewal Grasps, and B, Whisper of Chains, right? So now we don't have Whisper of Chains, we have Frost Armor in the final shape, and Renewal Grasps, instead of giving you just a static, generic resist buff, you're going to get instantly, when you enter your slowing field, you're going to get Frost Armor. Right, and that frost armor is going to build up over time. So for every second that you're in your Duskfield, you gain a stack of frost armor. I think it's 0.9 seconds is what Bungie said. But basically, which is kind of cool. It's like if an enemy goes into your Duskfield grenade, you can see them. You know, their slow stacks build up until they're eventually frozen. Well, now if you're inside your Duskfield grenade, your frost armor stacks build up until you're totally maxed out on frost armor. right? So as long as you're in your dusk field for, less than 5 seconds, you're going to have 22.5% DR. And if you're using Whisper of Rhyme and you stand in your dusk field for, I guess, 8 seconds, like 7 or 8 seconds, you'll have up to 36% DR. So it is technically a little bit of a nerf to the total amount of damage resistance that you can get on renewal grasps. But it does give you the option to play into Frost Armor without having to sacrifice using certain aspects and fragments to acquire that Frost Armor, right? So some interesting changes there to renewal grasps, but everything else stays the same. We still get the giant Duskfield grenades with the giant Stasis crystal in the middle. So I mean, you know, they're still very potent. Obviously, there's no changes there. So yeah. Also, Ballador's Wrathweavers for Warlocks, they also got a rework. So now when you cast your Rift, you will get Frost Armor instantly. So like you compare something like Frost Pulse and Ballador's for casting a Rift, you freeze all targets, and you've got Frost Armor stacks. How many stacks? I'm not sure, but either way, Ballador's is going to be an exotic that you can use to get access to Frost Armor, right? So that has some implications to it that will be relevant for build crafting, right? And I find it interesting that there was no mention of Icefall Mantle, because if they're getting rid of Stasis Overshields completely, and one of the only Stasis exotic armors for Titan involves Stasis Overshields, kind of like how Ballador's used to, I don't understand what Icefall Mantle is going to do anymore, right? Because you used to pop your class ability, and then all of a sudden you've got a full Stasis Overshield, plus 25% weapon surges. Like you basically have 4 stacks of Stasis weapon surges whenever you pop your class ability on Icefall Mantle. So I guess that's staying the same, but I'm assuming now you're not going to have that Overshield. So I'm curious why Bungie didn't mention anything about this, if they're going to take the Overshield away from Icefall Mantle. And certainly if you're going to be stuck moving around like a tank and you can't sprint and you don't have an Overshield, like I would think that they would have made it so, like Renewal Grasps and Ballador's, they would have some easy access to Frost Armor. So that's just kind of a curiosity point for me. Then we've got Whisper of Reversal. So this is a brand new fragment, and it's kind of interesting, and it could synergize well with Whisper of Fractures, right? So Whisper of Fractures, again, like I just discussed, can give you Frost Armor from doing melee shatters, basically. While Whisper of Reversal, this new fragment, is going to benefit basically close quarter combat in the thick of things, melee-based builds. And what it does is, as long as you have Frost Armor, any melee damage that you deal or take or receive from the enemies will slow enemies, right? So you deal damage, you slow enemies, you take damage, you slow enemies around you. As long as you're near the enemies and it's melee type of damage, you're just applying slow all over the place, right? So this could actually be a pretty good fragment to use on Revenant, which already involves a lot of slowing as far as like a keyword. Like Bungie likes to call them keywords, buffs, right? I mean, they're buffs. Some people call them verbs too, but I mean, yeah. Bungie calls them keywords. I call them buffs. I think most people call them buffs. So, yeah, that should make sense. So, Whisper of Torment is the next fragment that got a rework, and not so much of a rework, but it just got a huge buff, because Whisper of Torment previously was just, I mean, one of 2 grenade ability regeneration fragments, and the worst one, right? So Whisper of Shards gives you 500% grenade energy when you break stasis crystals. So I mean, that is the grenade energy regen fragment to use, and basically if you want a grenade build, that's what you got to use. You're just gonna have to find a way to make stasis crystals to benefit. Like right now, Whisper of Torment gives you well, actually, I think Bungie put the numbers here, and it's 7%, right? So now it gives you roughly 7% grenade energy per damage instance that you take, right? So kind of like the opposite of Threat of Generation in Strand, where as you deal damage, you get grenade energy. Well, with Stasis, as you take damage with Whisper of Torment, you get grenade energy. right? And it just paled in comparison to Whisper of Shards, and was barely, you know, it's hardly even noticeable. So now, Whisper of Torment is just getting a flat-out buff. I think it's moving from... Actually, here, let me check the numbers real quick. Okay, so verbatim here, Bungie's words, Whisper of Torment, grenade energy regeneration amount per incoming damage event increased from 5% to 7%. Right, okay, that makes sense. So right now it's 5%, which is why nobody uses it. It's getting bumped to 7%, it's still not that great, but they're adding, while you have Frost Armor, this is what they wrote, while you have Frost Armor, energy per damage event increases from 7% to 12%. So that's like 150% buff, basically, to Whisper of Torment while you have Frost Armor, right? Obviously, it's conditional upon having Frost Armor, but you still get a generic buff even if you don't have Frost Armor, so that's, you know, that's kind of nice. So Whisper of Torment might be something to consider for your Stasis builds. Let me go back to my notes here. Right, so, and this is, again, this is a fragment that synergizes with Frost Armor, right? It's not giving you access to Frost Armor, but it is giving you benefits for using Frost Armor. So then we've got Whisper of Chains, and now Whisper of Chains, like, Whisper of Chains is basically the staple fragment for survivability in this game for Stasis subclass. I'm using it right here in Legend Onslaught. Would Legend Onslaught be possible for this build without Whisper of Chains? It would definitely be far less survivable. So this is a major change, because now Whisper of Chains is not going to give you damage resistance at all. Instead, it's going to allow you to produce Stasis Shards when you kill enemies while you have Frost Armor. So it's kind of like Thread of Transmutation for Strand, right? So when you have Woven Mail and you kill enemies, regardless of the weapon type, you can produce a Tangle, right? So something that a lot of like Banner of War Titans use with like Synthos, right? You don't even have to use strand weapons, you just always have Woven Mail, so your kills are going to give you more Tangles, which is going to allow you to, you know, have more Woven Mail and more melee energy and all that kind of stuff. So now Whisper of Chains is going to work basically the same way as Whisper Thread of Transmutation, where as long as you got Frost Armor, you kill some enemies, you're going to get Stasis Shards. Yeah, it kind of seems very mild. Definitely a totally different identity than what it is now, and it doesn't sound like it's going to be all that great. But that's okay, because we have all these other things to consider now. So then there's Whisper of Chill, and Whisper of Chill is a brand new Stasis fragment as well, just like Reversal. Right, so we got two new ones and the other ones are reworked. So Whisper of Chill is going to, it's going to work like Spark of Discharge for Arc. That's the way to look at it, right? So if you're on Arc and you use Spark of Discharge, your Arc weapon final blows have a chance to create an Ionic Trace. Well, Whisper of Chill is going to work the same way for Stasis, right? So you just get kills with Stasis weapons and you can get a Stasis Shard randomly. It's actually a very simple fragment, and if you really want to build into Stasis Shards or you can't get them in any other way, then Whisper of Chill might be a decent fragment to use there. So yeah, hopefully this sheds some light on the future of Stasis, but especially for Revenant, because a lot of these changes involve Revenant, like I've discussed. You know, Grim Harvest is going to give us access to healing and damage resistance bonuses that are, you know, greater than the other aspects, the other Harvest aspects. And this is going to change the identity of like the way I build into Hunter as well, because right now I'm using Touch of Winter, of course, but I'm also using Winter Shroud. And so now am I gonna use Grim Harvest so I can get bigger bonuses to Frost Armor, right? Especially with the changes to Whisper of Chains. I don't really know how I'm gonna play into that yet, but that's kind of something interesting to consider. But on the note of Winter Shroud, that's actually getting a massive buff. So I'm very happy about this, because I almost always use Whisper of Winter Shroud on my Revenant builds, right? Because I'm not really super interested in creating Stasis Shards currently on Revenant, because I know that I can just go on my Titan and just shit Stasis Orbs or Stasis Shards everywhere, right? Like you destroy a crystal, you got like stasis shards all over the place. You pop your super, there's like 50 stasis shards on the ground. So it's like, if I ever really want to play into stasis shards, I just go play Behemoth, right? But now, like, we have some pretty dramatic changes here, so I don't know. But all I'm saying is, I just generally like Winter Shroud currently, even though a lot of people don't. It's just really nice being able to dodge near an enemy and instantly slow them. It's like, it's kind of like the Strand, Threaded Spectre for Strand on Threadrunner, right? You dodge, you create that decoy, the enemies are like distracted by your decoy, you end up saving your own life, essentially, right? And the lives of your teammates. Well, Winter Shroud basically is the same, because you're slowing the enemies. You slow them, you're applying disruption, you stun overload champions, they can't move as fast. You've built up their slow stacks. Like, if you combine it with like Gambler's Dodge, like you can get 40 stacks of slow on them from your dodge, replenish your shurikens, and then just throw a Withering Blade, and then all of a sudden they're frozen, right? Or if they're already frozen and you dodge near them, now they're if they're already slowed and you dodge near them, well, now they're frozen. So I just really like Winter Shroud, and I always have. But now it's going to give you class ability regeneration. We'll have to see what the rate is, but it's going to give you class regen whenever you slow enemies, period. Like, it doesn't matter how you slow them, at least not from the language that I'm seeing, you're gonna get you're gonna get more class ability. So that's kind of nice. Also, you get some instant damage resistance while you do your dodge, so I guess that's kind of a quality of life change there. It kind of gives you the payoff of having to go near enemies and dodge, maybe give you a little bit of extra survivability there, so that's kind of nice. Touch of Winter has some minor changes to the Glacial Grenade and the Cold Snap, which I don't really care about because I'm mainly using Dusk Fields anyways. Silence and Squall is a super. This is my favorite Stasis super, and it's getting better tracking. It's getting more aggressive tracking, like faster tracking and better tracking, and it's getting its super damage increased and its slow tick rates increased, right? So more shatter damage, more damage in general, so better super, that's awesome. Other improvements that we have here, shatter damage is basically being doubled, which is great. Base PvE damage is 200, it's being bumped up to 400. Ice Flare Bolts, the aspect for Shadebinder. Warlock is having their Seekers increase from 5 to 7, so better Ice Flare Bolts, which is pretty cool. Baldor's Wrathweavers, we've already talked about. Tectonic Harvest, you can now make stasis shards by shattering frozen targets as opposed to only shattering stasis crystals. So a little quality of life improvement to Tectonic Harvest. Shiver Strike and Glacial Quake are getting some quality of life type buffs. Shiver Strike is getting better tracking and better damage, I believe. Glacial Quake is just having the usability improved as far as sprinting to shatter your crystals. Then Cryoclasm is basically being balanced so that you can sort of instantly activate Cryoclasm upon sprint. Diamond Lances are being buffed so that they have better blast radius on the throw and slam functions, as well as ease of use similar to Tangles. So that's pretty much it. I'll see you in the next one.